right, greetings everybody, and welcome to the Best of Conflict Radio. We're still on season one as we plow through the end of November and going into December here coming up. We're going to go on a little bit of a tear and put some of these videos out every night. This episode is a long one, so I'm just going to put the whole thing up as full. This is episode 11, the Crystal Skulls and Project Looking Glass with Joshua Shapiro. So this should be an interesting one for everybody. I hope everybody enjoys it. It way back when it first came out, episode 11, it had 490 views, and I bet you we'll get close to that coming into this one. I hope you guys enjoy it, and we'll be back tomorrow with another Best of Season 1 episode. Until then, check it out. You're listening to Conflict Radio on the Conflict Radio Network. Greetings, and welcome to Conflict Radio. We're going to get right into it today with Joshua Shapiro. He has been involved with crystal skulls since 1983 when he saw one made out of amethyst in Northern California. He felt such a strong connection with this artifact that since that time he has devoted his life and resources to sharing the best information he can about these crystalline artifacts with other people all over the world and the future role they will play to help our planet see world peace. He also has some great free ebooks for you. All you have to do is go to his website, crystalskullexplorers.com, hit the contact tab and send him an email, and he will send you some free books. So definitely go there and check him out. He's a very interesting person. He's got a lot of really good information that I hope everybody enjoys hearing this and soaks in what he has to say. With that being said, we'll be right back right after this. Well, welcome back to Conflict Radio. We're with Joshua Shapiro. He's a crystal skull explorer and paranormal researcher. Josh, how you doing?
I'm doing great, and I'm very excited to be on your show, Conflict. You want me to call you Conflict, right?
Yeah, that's fine. How's your day going today?
I did a radio show on Saturday morning for Coast to Coast, and I have finally caught up with all the people who contacted me here 3 days later. So I'm happy.
All right, awesome. Well, we're glad to have you on after staying up all night with them. How did you first get into the crystal skull journey that you're on?
Well, like most people, Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World, which is a television show where Arthur C. Clarke, looks at all these different mysteries. It had on the beginning the Mitchell-Hedges crystal skull, like in the intro. So like everyone else, I had seen that, and I was familiar with crystal skulls, but I never thought that this would be something that would become a major part of my life. However, I was opening up after I graduated from college, which was in 1977. So 77, 78, I started to become interested in what then was being called either metaphysical or New Age. Now it's called paranormal. It's all these mysteries and the idea that there are spiritual planes of existence and everything. So what happened was I was traveling on faith to go to California, and so many things have happened. Let me step back, because that wasn't with the crystal skulls. That was the writing of my first book, and then I came back to California. So 1981-82, I was traveling on faith. I eventually wrote a book called Journeys of an Aquarian Age Networker. And it was when I was writing that book and traveling on faith to California, I met this woman who had a metaphysical bookstore in San Jose, California. And we became very close. And as it turned out, she had a son who passed away who had the same birthday I did. So, it's probably like a past life thing. So I was going to her store to see if she needed more copies of that book in 1983 in April. And she pulls out a picture while we're visiting of an amethyst crystal skull. Now, amethyst is a purple quartz, and this crystal skull was made from that. And I had a very profound response to the photograph. So I call this day one of being a crystal skull explorer. So first of all, what happened is, as I'm looking at the picture, I'm feeling like an inner earthquake, like is shaking inside, a strong vibration, which I had no idea exactly what's happening to me. I didn't expect it. And then I would say about 15 or 20 minutes later, as we're sitting at the table in the bookstore talking, there was a real earthquake in California, in Colingus, California, and this bookstore was in San Jose, so it was probably like about 150 miles south, and it must have been pretty powerful because I recall the table was vibrating and the picture on the table of the skull was vibrating. But the other thing that I recall happening to me is, as I'm looking at the picture, and I'm assuming that your listeners are totally open to, the so-called paranormal experiences, and don't think that people who have them are all crazy and nuts. All right. I'm starting to receive a telepathic communication from the skull through its picture. Now, one of the things that we know is that any facsimile of a crystal skull, if it's done in the same shape, so it can be a picture, it could be a slide, it could be somebody who creates a model of it, it's going to have the essence of its frequencies and energy. And so I start getting this communication through the picture, and the message is, we, representing the skulls coming through this amethyst skull, are in the process, because, several skulls had already come out by 1983. We're in the process of returning to help humanity to create world peace. And then I kind of felt like I was being challenged. So now that you know, and now that you've had all these strange experiences around this, what are you going to do about it, Joshua? So, I had to think about that. And then I recalled that I organized this group to go back to the store and look at the picture. And then eventually I had the opportunity to see the skull in person. So it's like the picture was preparing me for my meeting with the skull in person. So when I saw the skulls, I'll tell you that experience, and then I'll say what I was thinking and feeling at that time.
Okay.
After all of this. So the skull apparently, I found this out later. I didn't understand it at that time. It was with a group of Hispanic businessmen. What they had done is they had been approached by a Mayan priest who said the people in his village were very poor. So they made an arrangement with the Mayan priest, and this must have taken place, I saw it in 83. So I think it was in 1982 they made the agreement. So that means they had this crystal skull for about over a year. They made an agreement they would give him a loan, and in exchange, they got to keep the skull, and then they bought some other Mexican artwork and things like that they paid him for. But the skull and a few of these items, they held on to him and said, if you pay us back this money we're giving you and the loan, and I have no idea how much that was, then we'll give you back the skull and these other, sacred artifacts. But the Mayan priest never paid them. So I forget, I think it was in 1985 or something, the Hispanic group decided, okay, now this skull belongs to us, and we can do whatever we want. So even in 1983, they were looking for someone to buy the skull, because that's how I got to see it. Supposedly there was this wealthy person in town. Okay, now this is after I saw the picture, and I got invited to a meeting with this wealthy person. And, they had the skull in a vault in an art gallery that one of the business owners had. So they brought it out in a box, opened the box up from the vault, and put it on the table, and everybody could see it. And then somehow I was allowed to touch this crystal skull. So what I did is I just put my right hand, which is interesting because I'm left-handed, but I felt to put my right hand on the top part of the skull. And my experience was I felt a vibration and energy move from my hand, touching the skull, up through my arm, into my shoulder. And then in my mind's eye, I had a vision of the skull floating over my right shoulder, which actually, as I'm thinking about it, I still feel the skull there. Now, what the listeners need to understand is the crystal skulls, which I haven't defined yet, have very strong frequencies of energy and a living consciousness, which I'll need to explain. And what happens is once I make contact with the physical object, it's like from then on, I can see it around me. Like the amethyst skull is over my right shoulder. There's a blue skull we're going to talk about, and that's on my left side at a 45-degree angle, Mitchell-Hedges skull in front. So the skulls just somehow link into my energy and essence, and they position themselves in a place where in my mind's eye I see them. So basically, the skull was asking me what I was going to do, and I felt this is a fantastic thing. I got to let people know about it. So I was given pictures, and I was doing these impromptu lectures more about New Age or UFOs or whatever. And then once I had this picture, I would bring the picture and I would share it with the people who came to my talks. So that was my beginning. That was day one of being a crystal skull explorer. Now, I had no idea, even after I met this skull, that I would be doing research, that I would be doing lectures, that I would be doing radio and TV interviews, or even the other thing, which I'm not leaving the earth till this gets done, is I have like 2 story ideas that the crystal skull is in. I want to see them get made into a movie. And the reason I want to see those movies made is because I think they give a very realistic scenario how world peace can happen, which the crystal skulls are involved in somehow. So I hope I answered your question. So that was my beginning of having contact with the crystal skulls.
So what are they exactly? They're really old, right? They go back. How long did they go back? Like, how old are they?
Well, it depends upon which type of crystal skull are we referring to. Are we referring to what are called very old or ancient skulls or old skulls, or the new ones being made by modern carvers, or there's another class which came up within the last few years called imported skulls? So let me define those 4 classifications. You're asking me about the very old or ancient skulls, and then I'll come back and tell you, what our thoughts are about that and how we arrive at that.
Okay.
So the first ones I would say that came out would be the very old or ancient ones. They were uncovered by ancient ruins in Mexico in particular. However, now here in 2020, they're starting to find crystal skulls in other places beyond Mexico. Like there's one I saw that was found with the Scythians, which is a race that lived in Russia, made out of, was that the one? Yeah, I think so. You'll have to excuse me. I can't remember. I'm not sure if it was this rose quartz or if it was this green skull. But anyway, it was a crystal skull, and it was found in Love, Russia. So they're finding them in different places. So the very old or ancient ones are ones that an advanced civilization in the past had to create it. Because one of the best examples of this, which is the most famous one, is the Mitchell-Hedges skull. Now, when we're talking about a crystal skull, so your listeners get this, we're speaking about a skull that's made out of, we found quartz crystal skulls, but now we're starting to find crystal skulls, and also modern carvers are creating them from every gemstone that you can imagine. Okay, so anything that's made from a gemstone or quartz that looks like a face is being called a crystal skull. And I have to say a face because not all of the crystal skulls either being uncovered or either being carved are like the human bone skull. We have animal type skulls, we have extraterrestrial type skulls, we have stylized type skulls, but each skull has a face, so it has an eyes and a mouth and a nose, and then whatever the shape is. So the ancient ones are the ones that I think could have come from Atlantis or Lemuria, or even some of the primitive cultures, the Mesoamerican cultures primarily, although I think the Tibetan Buddhists also have crystal skulls, and I think there's a few others There's another one I'm thinking about, that a primitive tribe, I think it was in Australia, they had a fairly large crystal skull, or they said they had a twin of a crystal skull that was discovered. So we're talking about these different skulls. The next classification is what are called old crystal skulls, which I would say would be ones made from 100 years ago to about 1,000. This is the definition generally used. But we do not really have an accurate system of dating that we can look at a skull and say, oh, it's this many years old, because most of the time, as I understand it from archaeologists, unless they have some new, very advanced systems, when working with ancient artifacts, they use carbon-14 dating, which means that they're dating objects that were living systems. And obviously a stone is not a living system. So they're seeing how much decay of the carbon atom in a living system. So what possibly could be done is, let's say, find a skull in an ancient ruin, and you date the objects that carbon-14 works with. You could say, well, the skull has to be this old because it was found with these people. But what we believe, and this comes from legends as well as sensitives or psychics who sit with the skull and they get like their histories, they read their histories, is that crystal skulls have moved around to many cultures and civilizations. So you can't definitively say, oh, we found the skull, like the Mitchell-Hedges skull was found in a Mayan ruin. The Mitchell-Hedges skull is Mayan. According to sensitives who work with it, and what I remember of that skull, I think it was Atlantean. I think it was made in Atlantis. And when Atlantis sank, they had colonies where the Mayans lived in Mexico and the Yucatan. Actually, a large amount of the Yucatan sank under the water when Atlantis was destroyed. That this could be how the crystal skulls may have migrated from Atlantis to the Mayan lands. So those are the ancient or very old crystal skulls and the old skulls. The new skulls obviously are ones that modern carvers are making. They're using diamond tip tools right now, so they're getting very sophisticated. It used to be thought that the skulls that have a very accurate anatomic structure, like the Mitchell-Hedges skull, that we couldn't, there are no carvers who can make them. Well, that's not true anymore. There are talented carvers using diamond tip tools, because especially with quartz, it's a very hard substance. They are able to create very sophisticated and very accurate looking skulls. The difference is, if your listeners understand what I mean by this, is it's about energies. There are energies that are connected to the crystal skulls, and the ancient ones, which would be ones that could have been around for hundreds of thousands of years. I mean, if they're sitting with different people in sacred ceremony, sacred sites, having contact, I don't call them extraterrestrials, I call them galactics, with the hollow earth people, Sasquatch, all kinds of situations could happen over thousands of years. They would have been exposed to amazing frequencies of energy. Quartz crystal is a transmitter and receiver of these higher vibrational frequencies of energy. So this would be one of the reasons why that they would use quartz to make skulls from. And then the last group of skulls, I hope I'm explaining this clear enough, I'm trying to be as simple as possible, is the apported skull. Now, some people say, I never heard of the word apported. What does that mean? An apport is an object that just materializes seemingly from nowhere. Usually it's connected to a spiritual medium. So we have an apported skull. When we lived in the Seattle area, now we're close to Atlanta, where we went to, what do they call it, where kind of a seance type session. He was in a curtained area and beings were speaking through him. Well, at the end of the session, and he told us we had to come to this seance. He said, the Crystal Skull Council wants you to be there. So we actually put around this curtain, we brought all of our skulls and they were sitting outside, and I don't know what was going on with them, but, probably picking up energy or whatever. But at the end, when he came out, they put a towel underneath his mouth, and all these objects just start falling out of his mouth. He said that where it was coming from is that spirit that worked with him created an energy vortex, and they were using his physical body, and they just put all these jewelry and different gemstones in a little tiny crystal skull that looked monkey-like, made from what is it called? It's a form of opal, a fire opal. It has this fire you could see in it. Now, what he did with these gifts that came out, he would give them to the people there, and of course everyone knew who that little crystal skull was supposed to go to. So I remember when we were handed it, it was like vibrating so amazingly with energy, and now it doesn't have that energy. I think it's acclimated to being in the physical. So where did that skull come from? Through him? Was it teleported from somewhere else and came through him? Or was it actually created by the mind of the spirit beings that he was channeling? I don't know exactly. But that would be an example of an aborted skull. So now to come back to your original question, how old are they? They could be thousands, if not hundreds or millions of years old. There's no way to really know. These are the ancient ones. Atlantis, possibly Lemuria, seems to be involved with them. The Mayans know about them, but the Mayan, when I was at a Crystal Skull conference and one of the Mayan priests spoke, he said, these are gifts from the Pleiades. So he was implying they were gifts from ETs or galactics. So I think it's probably a combination of many different things. But the whole point of it is, if you listen to the indigenous people and ask them, why do you consider the crystal skull sacred? They'll tell you that they have special energy, that they're a receptacle of cosmic knowledge, they do healing, and they just have fantastic energies around them. And, some of these primitive people will not even talk about the crystal skulls they have, because they've watched the modern people come in and take all their sacred objects, and not respect them.
Yeah.
Okay. So I know that there are probably quite a few crystal skulls that are with different indigenous people that they are protecting because they have a prophecy, which is what basically this amethyst skull was saying. We're coming back to help humanity to create peace, that they're going to be involved somehow in this process. And part of, what I think is what they're here to do is to awaken us. Like, for example, if any of your listeners have ever been to like Peru or Stonehenge or something like that, you go into a place where this really high vibrational frequency and energies exist. It changes you, okay, because it's interacting with your electromagnetic energy around you, and it's shifting your consciousness. And it's like the crystal skulls, these older ones, can act as mini vortexes. In the same way, I've seen the same thing happen to people where, somebody not even sure why they want to see the crystal skull, and they see it, and all of a sudden some of their spiritual gifts will just immediately open up. So they are not just a stone made in the shape of a human bone skull or a face or, a stylized face. There's a lot more to them. And the only reason why I can share these things with you is because I've done a combination of things. I have personal experiences. We have 30 personal crystal skulls ourselves. I'm not really giving you much time to ask me questions here.
No, that's okay.
I'll stop in a moment.
I'll get them in there.
Right. So I have a lot of personal experiences with them. I listen to what the people tell me that have personal experiences, and quite a few people who heard me on Coast to Coast, which was late Friday night, Saturday morning, told me they had their own crystal skulls too. And it's what was the other point I wanted to say? So it's the energy, having contact with them, and learning about them. Some people have to understand them first before they're willing to accept to have an experience. On the reverse, I like to just jump in because I'm Aries and say, oh, this is an unusual item. I want to experience it directly,
Yeah.
So I'm sure you're going to ask me about some of my stories, and they may sound fantastic and unbelievable, but I'm an honest person, And those experiences help me to better understand what the skulls are. They're not just a stone in the shape of a skull. They have something else going on around them, which, we'll get into more as you ask more questions about it.
Well, some of the older ones were made out of a special quartz that they use in computers and such today, right?
I don't know if I would really say that. I know that they are able to create quartz themselves, like grow it, but they're always using a seed crystal to grow the quartz from. So it wasn't. I mean, there's I've heard about Lemurian crystals, which they're finding in Brazil, which seem to be a little bit different than the regular type of quartz. But the skulls that I've seen, I don't really feel like they're using any kind of special quartz to make them. Because of the properties of quartz, they can take a piece of quartz, and the ancients and the indigenous people knew how to activate these skulls through ceremony or just working with them. And so that's the reason why they have a lot of energy and power around them. But even with the new skulls, if they're with the right person or you bring them to sit with, they call the ancient ones their older brothers and sisters, they're going to start getting activated and start producing some similar effects like the very old crystal skulls. So I would not say that there's like a special quartz that was used, although it is possible that, maybe they had some technologies we're not aware of where they enhanced quartz or they were able to create quartz and maybe its lattice structure was more powerful. I know Marcel Vogel, who used to work for IBM and helped create the hard drives that we use, he was able, quartz crystal comes naturally in 6 points. He was doing something to create crystals that had more than 6 points. So I'm not exactly sure what he was doing, and I'm not exactly sure how more than 6-pointed quartz crystal could be used to create a skull, but that's something, I had heard about, and I'd actually held some of these pieces, and the energy of a more than 6-sided quartz had a completely different frequency than 6-sided.
Yeah, I was doing a little research on the crystal skulls last night because I like to dig into it a little bit before I talk to my guests. Mm-hmm. And I was hearing somewhere on some YouTube video or somewhere that there are 13 original old ones, and they're scattered all around the world, and eventually they all need to come back together to one point, and then they will activate something. Have you heard of this? Do you know anything about this?
Yes, of course. This is a very popular legend that comes out of the indigenous people. The concept of a skull in the center surrounded by 12, 1 plus 12, this number comes up repeatedly in many systems connected to the earth, like in religion. Christianity, you have the Christ and the 12 apostles. In Judaism, which I was brought up, we have the Levites or the priest and the 12 tribes of Israel. And then there are other people who speculate that there are 12 planets in our solar system around the sun. Now, we know of 8 or 9, depends upon how you classify Pluto. I hear different classifications for Pluto because it's small. But George Hunt Williamson, who I actually had contact with one time in the early 80s, was a early UFO researcher, said that there was one planet that we cannot see because of the light of the sun in front of Mercury. And I guess that there are 2 more planets beyond Pluto. So that would give us 12. I forget the name of it. The Anunnaki, you know which planet I'm talking about? God, I just watched the video with him.
Yeah, that's the whole Planet X and Nibiru thing, right?
Nibiru. Yeah, it's Nibiru. So some people are speculating that Nibiru is beyond Pluto and doesn't have a circular orbit. It has an elliptical orbit. And so that's the reason why it comes near the Earth. That possibly there could be 2 planets beyond Pluto to make 12. It's just a theory. Now, related to the skulls, they have a similar prophecy or legend that there's an original set of 13, as you said, that now where this original set from 13 came, there's different theories about it. Some people said it was in Atlantis that they had these 13 skulls, that each skull was in a different temple. Some people might think that maybe the Galactics gifted this set to humanity. But this theme comes up now. One thing I heard from the Mayans, especially when I was connected to this conference where there were two Mayan priests, is they talk about 52 skulls, because 52 is a very sacred number for them. But 52 is 4 times 13. So I'm given the impression that they had a set of 13 skulls, and 3 other cultures also had their own set of 13 skulls. So a lot of people feel an affinity for this, but whether there's proof of this or not, I don't know. But the legend says that the 13 master skulls were together long ago, possibly in Atlantis. When Atlantis was destroyed, then they were scattered all over the world, and that eventually they're going to come back together. Now, I have one of my stories I wrote is called Crystal Skull Chronicles. I have not released this story publicly. The only people who've seen it was we created for about 2 years an online membership. And as we were writing the novelization of the movie of this, because I work with a person from Australia who helped me write a movie script on this story, we did a novelization, so they got to see a chapter like every month. In that story, I talk about these 13 original skulls, and that they come back together in a very special place in Brazil, which is called, in English it's called High Paradise. I can't remember what it is in Portuguese. Alto Paraíso is its name. And in my story, one skull is found by, the main characters, but then they feel they have to go to Alto Paraíso where they meet the other 12. And when the 13 are reunited, they create like a very high, powerful energy vortex that just like shoots in the air from their circle and totally covers the earth. And when this energy hits the planet, everybody flips, and we have total world peace. Like the world at this time is going crazy. They have wars. They have people fighting with each other. The weather patterns are insane. Probably pandemics going on like right now. And then once this energy hit, it just flips everyone. And like, let's say you have an Israeli and Arab, that's what I saw in my mind. They're fighting with each other. And all of a sudden they hug each other as brothers, because the vibrational frequency emanated by the 13 skulls flips everyone and brings peace. So that's like the catalyst to awaken us. Now, I don't know if that actually will ever happen or not, or whether these 13 skulls will come together, or if it's a different set. It might be 24, 26. But the legends told by the indigenous people, which a lot of people feel a great affinity for, is that there's one master skull surrounded by 12 others. In the first book that we did about the crystal skulls, which I did with co-authors Nasarino and Bowen, there was a person who we interviewed who I would call him a star person. Star person meaning that his soul comes from another planet and he incarnated here. He claimed to have had contact with extraterrestrials, to have been on spacecraft, and also to have met with what we call the inner earth people, the people that live in the hollow inside. And he was telling us a story again about how the set of 13 was set up, again with one in the center and 12 around. And there was like inner earth tribes. Each tribe had their own crystal skull, which had the genetic encoding of their race. And their race may not have been terrestrial, that these races may have come from other planets, other places, and they chose to go inside the inner earth because the vibrational frequency inside the earth is very high, much higher than on the surface. So as you can easily see, the crystal skulls have a lot of stories around them, a lot of theories. What I've just told you, I have no way to prove it, but it is things that I have a close affinity to, which I think have elements of truth. And that the crystal skulls also link to many other subjects, paranormal subjects, world mysteries, etc.
Oh, that's interesting. So what do you think the prophecy is? You spoke earlier of a crystal skull prophecy. Is that the prophecy you were talking about?
Yes, I am in agreement. I feel strongly that this prophecy of the 13 skulls coming together is going to be true. And I think that these skulls are of a very high vibrational frequency. I don't know if anyone could be in their presence without disintegrating, and I think humanity's not ready for them. Okay? So they're being hidden, or they're in another dimension, and they're waiting for humanity to come to a point in our evolution where then they will come out and present themselves. All the other skulls, now this is my feeling, and I have other people who feel the same as me, that have come out already. They're not this master set, but they are other crystal skulls that could have been used by very advanced civilization or ancient civilizations in the past, or gifts from the gods. And these other ones coming out are basically preparing us, for this master set to come out. Now, according to my story, when those 13 come together, in that moment, that is the catalyst that takes our world into world peace. So do
you think that it changes our consciousness?
Yes, because it releases a vibrational frequency when they're together, if this indeed does happen, that will shift our consciousness, and we'll become more aware of our divine presence and our spirit and our soul and all that. Now, related to this, there's one story I heard, and I cannot shake it, so I think it has elements of truth.
Okay.
I think when Lemuria was around, and there was some group of souls or some galactic beings, they looked at the earth and said, we would like to experience a more physical reality, because I think they were more etheric or dimensional. And so when they first tried to do this, they had great difficulty with it, because they still had their memories of what it was like to be in the other dimensions. And since the ability to be in the other dimension is controlled by the level of consciousness, mental energy, or mind, as soon as they thought about it, they couldn't stay here. So they had to set up something inside of themselves where they would forget their divine origins. So if you talk to most people and say, do you believe in God? Well, yeah, I believe in God, but can you see God? Can you touch God? Can you communicate with God? Most people say, no, this is just something I have on faith. Right? But I think at the level where these Lemurians were, that they were, in touch with Creator. I rather call it God Creator. And their vibration was just too high. They couldn't exist in the physical. So they had to take this, what is called a memory veil. Now, I'm 65 years old, and I think that by visiting with all these different crystal skulls, it's changed me, because I have a much better sensing about the essence of what God represents or Creator represents. And I can see how I can be here in the physical in this crazy world where it takes a long time for things to manifest. And inwardly, the only way I can do this is by experiencing inwardly. I also have the sensing about other realities where you think of something and it manifests instantaneously. And what the relationship with Creator would be. So I think that when humanity shifts this consciousness, we will have a much better feel for, what is creation, Creator. A lot of the mysteries we have, we'll have answers to that, because supposedly as divine children of God, we're supposed to have access to all wisdom and all knowledge in every instant we're alive or in time. Okay, and I believe that's true, but we have this memory veil, and so it keeps us focused on our earth lifetime. So, we have to do earthly things. We have to go to the bathroom, we have to eat, we have family, we have different adventures here on planet Earth, but we don't have access to these more advanced gifts that supposedly we have, like where we could, just think where we want to go and instantaneously teleport ourselves there, or we can do laying on of hands healing, or we can even go to other planets and other universes. So I think what it is, we're on the verge of a major transformation of consciousness. Humanity is getting ready to really remember who we truly are. And when I started working with the skulls, I felt like they were a physical sign that this transformation is in the process of happening. So
Yeah, well, I mean, if they're if they're really, hundreds of thousands of years old, I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is could it be that we're purposely being suppressed by other forces on the earth that are keeping our consciousness from evolving?
well, now you're getting into the deep state. So I would say yes, there's definitely that possibility. And I've also heard, too, with some of the galactic races, like the Greys or the Dracos or something like that, they do not want humanity to awaken and know who we are. So, yeah, that has been going on, too. There have been forces on our level here trying to keep us also from not remembering.
All right.
So it's probably a combination of things.
We'll have to get back into that in a little bit. I do want to ask you about the Belgium lecture antenna story. Do you have a story that you could tell us about that?
Okay, so first let me define what this Lecuyer antenna is, because I never heard of it either till I met this person from Belgium. So a Lecuyer antenna is named after the person who found it. It's kind of like a dowsing rod, except it has numbers on it. And the practitioners that I met said what they know is they know the number of a specific frequency of energy. So, like, for example, there might be an energy for if a person has cancer. So they will put the rod around the individual and they will set it at the number. And if that rod flips by itself, it's doing it by itself, which is pretty amazing. It's not a machine or a motor or anything. It's just flipping by itself. Then that would indicate to the practitioner that the person has cancer. And they may even have numbers for certain types of cancers, let's say. So what the idea was, when I talked to my friend who is a member of this group in Belgium, was to see what frequencies of energy could be measured by the Lecuyer antenna with a crystal skull. Okay, so that makes sense, right? They're just going to have the crystal skull in front of them. A practitioner will have the Lecuyer antenna. He moves it towards the skull. They put it on different settings to see what frequency of energy it has. And when it flips, then they know that's the energy. It's like they had a chart that said if this number shows up, it's this energy. That number shows up, it's some other kind of energy or some other phenomena. So what was interesting is I think what was happening at this meeting at my friend's house is his group that works with the Lecuyer antenna, they were meeting. And so he asked them, would it be okay to have my friend come with their crystal skull and we do some, measurements with the Lecuyer antenna? So permission was given. Now, what I thought was really funny is when I brought out the crystal skull to be tested, which was one of my personal ones, which, by the way, is called Portal de Luz, which is Portuguese or Spanish for portal of light. This is the name the skull gave me when I received it. That's another story we'll have to go into later. So I put Portal de Luz down on the table, and the practitioners, start going with their Lecuyer antenna, measuring frequencies and energy and so on. Their teacher says, nothing is going to happen. This is a stone. We are wasting our time today. So the student says, okay, well, let's just test it and see, and if there's nothing there, we'll get no measurement. So they start measuring, and I watch their Lecuyer antenna flipping, and then it's flipping again, and another measurement, and another measurement, and they go back to the teacher, and of course they're speaking in Flemish, which I don't understand, so my friend translates for me, and they're saying, this crystal skull is showing the frequencies of energy of the 5 human senses. The teacher goes, come on, you're ridiculous. Do the test again. That cannot be. It's impossible. They did the test 3 times. And 3 times, Portal de Luz was emanating the frequencies of energy of the 5 human senses. So I think that's very remarkable, because here we have this stone which has this consciousness, higher consciousness working through it, and it's showing these frequencies. Now, there were other energies that Portal de Luz showed. There was something that was kind of going right through him that went into the earth. And then they claim that when we took him out into the backyard and he found the right spot that he liked, because he would tell me, we put him in this spot and I would feel really dark, heavy energy. He didn't like that. But when he found the spot he liked, they said that there was an energy vortex that appeared that wasn't there before we put him down on the ground. So that's what happened with this experiment. And if the skull is emanating the frequencies of a human being, then in a way, I don't know if the skull did that on purpose or if it was trying to say, look, I'm a person. I'm an intelligent being that's here working through the skull, and I'm alive. And so that's how I would interpret that message.
Okay. Now, have you tried taking the skull into different areas of paranormal activity?
Well, these are the different things that have been done with crystal skulls. Some of them I have done, some I have not. The first book that I was involved in crystal skulls, which unfortunately is out of print, so you probably have to go onto Amazon to find a used copy of it. It's called Mystery of the Crystal Skulls Revealed. My co-authors, F.R. Nick Nasarino and Sandra Bowen, used color, light, and sound with different crystal skulls, and they were able to get holographic images appearing inside of the skull. Now, this is another thing that happened to Portal de Luz in a way. So what we're saying is the inside of a crystal skull, a solid object, when it's activated in some way or some energies are around it, it starts shifting its physical form. So in this case, with my co-authors, especially with the Mitchell-Hedges skull, it was showing holographic images, and they took pictures, and you can see in the pictures holographic images, like a picture of Sasquatch came up in one. I remember there was a UFO that showed up in another picture, and they even had a picture of a Mayan city inside, caves with people. It's really unbelievable.
So it's like all underground.
Huh?
The Mayan city was underground, you're saying?
No, it was a regular Mayan city on the surface of the earth.
Oh, I just thought you said there was one in a cave. Like, it was kind of...
No, I was saying it showed another scene where there were people in a cave.
Oh, okay.
So it wasn't a Mayan city. Didn't mean to imply that. So this was one thing that they would do, color, light, and sound, activate it and start taking pictures, and you would see these holographic images inside. We also used, besides the Leckyer antenna, we used Carillion camera. But when you use a Carillion camera or the stress test system with meridians, you're recording the energy of a person who's being exposed to a crystal skull, because you can't attach that equipment to a crystal skull to measure it. So that's more of using scientific tools to measure the energies which are paranormal, okay? Because, an object shouldn't have all these energies affecting people. So we have to try to see if there's a way to measure it, and you have to use those devices to measure the energy of the person and see, you do, we did a test where somebody was blindfolded, so they didn't know what they're being tested with. If nothing was in front of them, if a crystal skull was in front of them, if there was a piece of crystal, they weren't touching it, they didn't know what was there. And then we would measure their energies, and we saw that when the crystal skull started getting involved, it raised their frequency. The most interesting test that we did was we worked with a group of healers in Holland, and there was one healer, only one out of the whole group, that when the crystal skull was introduced, it didn't really have any profound effect or change their frequency. They were so imbalanced, the skull could not do anything. But even the rest of the healers, I think it was like 15 healers, so 14 other people, they showed a significant increase in their vibrational energies measured through their meridians. So each meridian is connected to like an organ in the body or a system in the body. The meridian stress test system is allowed to be used in Europe by medical doctors because it's extremely accurate to say what's going on with the person. I'm not sure if this is allowed here in the United States. It may only be allowed for to get some information, but not to prescribe a cure with it.
Yeah.
Now, from a more paranormal perspective, what happens to people who are in the presence of crystal skulls? Some go into an altered state of consciousness. Some people, after they see it, have a profound dream. Some people have a miraculous healing. I'm going to give you an example of 2 crystal skull guardians who had a miraculous healing with the crystal skull that came to them. Let me take a sip of water here. Okay, so first we have my friend Al Ramirez. He's deceased. But remember I told you I met this amethyst skull? That was the first one?
Yeah.
He was one of those Hispanic owners of the skull. So I became friendly with him, and he told me a story how the skull helped him tremendously. So there came a day where he was unable to focus and function. His body wouldn't work, and he had to go see a doctor to understand what was going on. And the doctor said, there's a blood vessel in your head that's not growing properly, and that's what's causing these problems. Now, we can resolve it by doing a surgery, but I think at this time it was 60 or 70. But because you're so old, I cannot guarantee it will work. And if it doesn't work, you will become a vegetable. Are you willing to take this chance? And Mr. Ramirez said, yes, I will do the surgery. So he did the surgery, and exactly what the doctor said happened. He became like a vegetable. So one day, somehow he was able to communicate with his family, and he indicated, put the skull, the back of the skull's head to the back of my head on the ground, next to each other, and just let me sit there with it. And as a result of doing that, all of his, normal functioning came back. Because when I met him, I could see the scar on his head from the surgery that they did. But, he was able to be fully functional and communicate and everything. Now, the second story is there's a crystal skull, smoky quartz skull, which is kind of like a gray color, or it could be black or kind of brownish, called E.T., which I actually saw with the owner of it, Yogi Van Dieten, when this man in Southern California received it from a family in Guatemala. They dug the skull from the ground on their property. Their shovel struck the skull, and I think there's some damage on E.T. From that shovel. Now, E.T. is the name that Miss Van Dieten gave the skull, but I will tell you the skull does not look human-like. It looks a little bit extraterrestrial because the top of the head is kind of pointed, and so is the lower jaw. So anyway, we refer to the skull as E.T. So after I met her, she decided to pick up the skull because the crystal store owner who brought it in from the family held it for her for a period of time. And she went with her daughter to Australia. While they were in Australia, she had the most terrible headaches. So she went, to the hospital, and they took an x-ray, and she was told, you have the largest brain tumor in a person's head we've ever seen walking around. We're going to have to do surgery on you. So she had 2 major surgeries to remove it, and she recalls having an out-of-body experience, I guess, while that was going on. And then after the surgery was over, she went with the crystal skull to Switzerland. I think about a year later she came back, and they couldn't believe it, that her skull had completely healed, was completely healed. And she felt that this crystal skull had come into her life to help her with this situation. And thereafter, she was functioning perfectly normal and everything. And, when the surgeons would show people the size of this tumor put in a glass jar with a liquid, nobody would believe their story that they took it out of a person's head. So these are two other examples of, very profound healing that people have received. Now, some people on the Coast to Coast radio show, I think I was asked this and some wrote to me, if I get a crystal skull, I have this major health challenge. Is it going to help me? I cannot guarantee it because the skulls have to honor the karma of the individual they become, who that individual becomes their guardian of. Like it could be the karma of some people that they have a serious illness or a health challenge because that's the catalyst that brings out other gifts and abilities inside of them that they didn't even know they had, or they become an example for others how to overcome such a handicap or whatever. But if the individual learns, and we teach people how to work with their crystal skull, how to activate it, take it to sacred places, do meditation with it, there is a possibility that a healing energy can develop, or perhaps the healing energy comes through what I call this living consciousness that works through the skulls. So, now if we talk about the blue skull, which really I didn't want to talk about it this early, I only see the blue skull in my mind's eye, and I feel it around me in another dimension. And I feel that one day this crystal skull, when we're ready, is going to physically manifest into our world. So to show that I'm not crazy and there may actually be such a skull around me, what happens is when I do my presentations, I can feel the skull like float and land on my right hand, and my hand is really energized, and I let people feel that energy, and they say the energy coming out of my hand is really strong. So whether I happen to have strong energy and I'm tricking them, or the skull is sitting there and helping to activate it, I'm not sure. But this is another idea, from more of a paranormal perspective, what I think could happen. So it's possible, going back to the theory of the 13 so-called original crystal skulls, that they may not be in our physical reality right now because we're not ready to deal with them. Now, there was a show done by the Sci-Fi Channel about the crystal skulls when the Indiana Jones film came out. Mm-hmm. And they started looking for the known crystal skulls here if these were part of the set of 13. But my sensing is that the original set is not in the physical reality right now, or is being held by what I call the inner earth people inside the hollow earth. It's not time yet. So all these other skulls coming out are preparing us or giving us a chance to have an experience with the frequencies and energies.
So the inner earth people, who are they exactly? Do you have any ideas who they are?
Oh, I know exactly who they are. It's very simple. So, well, let me tell this story and then I'll go into it a little bit more.
Okay.
So when I was writing my book or collecting the information for my book, Journeys of an Aquarian Age Networker, I passed through Oregon, and I think it was Portland. I met this man named Ed Palmer, who's passed away now, because when I met him, he was in his 60s. And Ed Palmer claimed that he was a galactic, that he was an exchange baby, that his galactic family came and worked with an Earth family. They took the Earth family baby and they gave them theirs. So, he was showing me and saying there's some physical attributes when they do an X-ray on his body that aren't totally like the rest of us, like something with one of his ribs or whatever. But anyway, he remembered where he came from. When I went to meet him on his wall, he actually had his whole solar system, showed me which planet it was and everything. I never heard of this solar system. But then he said the following to me. He said that all planets are hollow. And this is the way in which they're created. So first they start off as kind of a energy spiraling, really fast. And then what he said is the heavier particles eventually form the crust of the planet, and the lighter particles form a mini sun that's at the very center. So when the planet is created in this way, here's how it works. Number one, gravity holds a person to the outer surface, like that's what's happening to us, but gravity would also hold the people on the inside to the inner surface. Because there's this little mini sun, they have sunlight 24 hours a day. Now, the only time that I had an experience of this was when I was in Alaska doing some crystal skull talks. I was there during the summer where the sun is there the whole time. And I can tell you that it was like 12 o'clock at night, and I still felt fully energized, and I wasn't tired at all. So when people have that kind of light coming from a sun, they may not even need to sleep or whatever. So the next question would be, if this is true, who's living on the inside of the earth? So when I call them the inner earth people, what I'm talking about is a race of people who are very tall. Now, this comes from people who've seen them. I may have met one person like this, but he was in a human body form. He was not in an inner earth body form. They're supposed to be tall. They're supposed to be in a higher frequency, like a fifth dimensional frequency, whereas we're in a third dimensional frequency. They could have originated from advanced civilizations that lived on the surface, because the gentleman I met, Mr. Colonel Woodard, who worked at Area 51, that says that, again, he was like when he was a baby, or he was regressed to a baby, and he was brought to the surface of the earth to be here, and then some family found him in, I think he was in a garbage can with his sister, and then he grew up as a regular person. But what he was saying about the people on the inside is they're in this higher frequency, that there are galactic races in there, and that some of the people there are from races who lived on the surface long ago. Because the problem that our Earth has is, scientists know this, is over periods of time, the entire surface is destroyed. Like the legends of the flood in the Bible is, one possible story, why the dinosaurs were killed, that there was some meteorite that came. So periodically, the surface of our world gets destroyed and civilization has to start over again. And this was according to Mr. Woodard as well. So he said most galactic races do not live on the surface of the world, they live on the inner surface. And a matter of fact, when I was interviewing a lady who was Channel of Pleiadian, and I said, would I be able to go visit you guys in my physical body in your spaceship? And they said, no, you would not be able to come because we don't have water to support you. We're in a higher frequency, and we're living in the inside of our planet. So
you got to wonder if there's not people living on the inside of Mars as well, right?
Well, according to Mr. Palmer, every planet is hollow, so Mars is hollow also. Now, where you may see where Mars is hollow is sometimes there seems to be what looks like a light shining from the top part of Mars. And see, if a planet is hollow, it's going to have openings at the North and the South Pole. So like Admiral Byrd is reported to have gone to the North Pole, and he met the inner Earth people. And when he came inside, there were levitation craft that these people had, and they guided him to their capital city, and he met their leader. And their leader said, I want you to take a message back to the people on the surface. You need to stop working with nuclear weapons. And should you decide to destroy yourself, because this planet's our home too, we will save and preserve all of your sacred knowledge and information and books and everything about you, your history and everything. But you must stop working with nuclear weapons. And of course, Admiral Byrd was forbidden to talk about his experiences. If you study his life, you'll see that right after he came back from I think this was sometime in 1947, that, he didn't talk very much. He wasn't very well known after doing his North Pole and Arctic. He also did the Antarctic excavation as well. He went to both. So this is who these people are. They're a very advanced race. They're probably from many other places or advanced civilizations that lived here. And it's basically a utopia. So obviously, if the people on the surface really understood that there's a utopia on the inner surface of the planet, probably a lot of people would want to go there. And the Hollow Earth people have guardians at the poles and any openings that come in, because our frequency of energy is not in harmony with theirs. If many Earth people came who are still into ego and greed and stealing and killing each other and being violent, that energy just doesn't function there. They have total peace. So somehow I'm aware of this. I think it's from past lives. I just know that this is absolutely correct. But again, like a lot of the crazy things I'm talking about, how can I prove such things? I can't. But it's what I believe. Now, you can find pictures on the internet that show the opening at the North and the South Pole that have been taken by satellites. But generally what happens is, because, the deep state, if you want to call it that, or whoever decides what information we're allowed to know and what we're not, they have used advanced technologies to cover over those openings so you can't see them in the pictures. But there's still some pictures out there where you'll definitely see it looks like there's a hole in there, and gravity pulled Admiral Byrd's plane into the inner surface. So that's what that's about. Now, the crystal skull connection comes from this gentleman, Michael Kent, that we interviewed for this first book, Mystery of the Crystal Skulls Revealed, who said that each inner Earth tribe or race has their own crystal skull and crystal skeleton that has their genetic coding inside of it and the sacred knowledge of their race. And that there are 13 skulls inside the Earth. So there's another indication again of this legend of there being a master set of 13 skulls. They may actually be in the inner Earth. It's one possibility. Or, like I said, they could be in another dimension waiting to come down here.
So how does the different dimensions fall into this? How many different dimensions do you think that there are?
Well, I would have to say 144. That's a very sacred number, 12 times 12. But, even if there is that many dimensions, I don't know how people on the Earth can really relate to it. The simplest way to relate to the idea of other dimensions is the sensing, like, sometimes I think I can link into my etheric body. I can actually feel like if I put my hands out, there's another set of hands I have, okay, but I can't see them and I can't touch them, but I can feel them energetically. So I think that there's very ample proof that there are, many, many dimensions in reality, many different planes of existence. And this would kind of make sense to me, because this is one of the profound statements that I heard from, I don't know if it's from Creator or some other being. I heard it in my mind's thinking voice, but I wasn't thinking it. So you understand what I'm saying? It was like inspired. All of a sudden I heard I was asking a question. I was saying, if Creator is this magnificent being who can imagine every conceivable reality there is, what is the purpose of having us exist? Okay? And the answer that came back was very simple. It said, your experiences. So what does that mean? Well, Creator wants to experience every conceivable reality, and Creator, in this, I'd call the Earth a classroom. In this classroom, we live in a physical reality, so Creator wants to experience through each of us the physical reality of time and space. We move in time, we move in space. But that may not be the true reality of how things work. So whether a person, from our perspective, is a wonderful, kind, loving, giving person, or the nastiest, most dark individual that you could ever meet, Creator wants to experience every conceivable reality. And that happens through each of us. So now the other thing, and again, I can't prove this, but I would say people have heard about the new quantum computers that they've developed. Mm-hmm. The quantum computer is supposed to be really fast. It has to be held at like near zero temperature. But when I listened to this gentleman who helped to create them explain it, he said that the quantum computer here is linked to parallel dimensions of similar computers. And because it's linked to these computers in the other dimensions or the parallel dimension, when you ask a question, every conceivable answer will come back. Because the condition exists somewhere in one of those parallel dimensions. So I think that we also have other parts of us, and that, like Stargate SG-1 had an episode where they had a problem with their Stargate, and all of a sudden alternative parallel Earth SG-1 teams were coming through the Stargate. So some of the teams had the same individuals as their team, some did not. They were all different. So in the parallel Earths that exist, we each make a different choice. So this is also would be consistent with what Creator's saying, or the voice that talked to me said, every conceivable possibility. So there are other us's making different choices. Like in my case, I've been with my Divine Light partner, Katrina Head, now for 12 years. I kind of see in my mind a reality where they don't agree to be together and they're very unhappy. So you can have these different choices. Also, this links in for me, and I'm sorry to be jumping around, but it's based on trying to answer your questions as best as I can. The Mandela effect, where, like, for example, the Field of Dreams movie. I saw the movie, and I know when Kevin Costner's out in the field, he hears the voice say, if you build it, he will come, which eventually we understand is referring to his father who's passed away, that he didn't have a good relationship with, and he wishes that he could have been able to talk to him to, have a good relationship and apologize and everything. But he passed away. But a lot of people remember in that movie, if you build it, they will come, referring to the 8 baseball players that eventually come out of the field who were part of the Chicago White Sox that are called members of the Black Sox, that supposedly they cheated and betted to lose to the Cincinnati Reds in the World Series, that were not allowed to play Major League Baseball. This is their ghost coming out of the cornfield. Now, I did a talk, I remember, in Seattle, and I asked people, how many people remember he will come and how many people remember they will come? And it was like 50-50. And I actually bought a shirt when I went to the baseball field that they created for the movie, where it says they will come. And I remember the movie, and that's the way the movie is now, unless it gets changed, perhaps. If you look, at it, you'll see Kevin Costner say, he will come. So why are people having different memories? And, of course, it started with Mandela, because some people remember Mandela when he was in prison dying, and they had on television, his memory and honoring him. And I know he didn't die. He became the president of South Africa, and then he passed away. So different people have different memories. So this could be a sign that, like, part of the transformation going on right now is that these different timelines are starting to reemerge and connect and all starting to come together. But the idea that there would be other us's in parallel Earths makes sense, because those other us's are making different decisions, which are resulting in different and unique experiences.
Yeah, but it's starting to look like all of the timelines are going to come together to one conclusion, right?
Well, this is what some people are thinking, and this may be an indication why we're having this Mandela effect, is because people are moving from one timeline to another, and because they're so similar, they're not noticing it right away, and all of a sudden they're noticing, wait a second, like if you saw, what was that TV series? I can't remember, Fringe, where there was a parallel Earth in there, and the Statue of Liberty was, I think in the other reality was gold, and in ours it's green. So, so it could be, you're correct, that these timelines are reemerging. Not totally sure if that's what's happening, but definitely I would say with crystal skulls coming out, with people saying they're having contact with galactics or with the inner Earth people or with the descendants from Atlantis and Lemuria who are living in underground cities like under Mount Shasta. We're coming into a magnificent time, even though right now we have a lot of crazy things going on. It seems like things are getting worse instead of better.
Yeah. Now, how does this all play into intuition and premonition?
Well, if I think the reason that I believe in a lot of what I am sharing with you, rather than intellectually thinking about it and saying, oh yeah, it makes sense, I'm using my intuition or my inner gifts to move into the energy of what it represents, and I'm feeling it inside of myself. And possibly it activates like soul memories where I can see, like when somebody talks about Atlantis, I can see Atlantis in my mind's eye. So there's no doubt for me that it existed because I was there. Now, here's one thing that might help understand this, is a lot of people say there really is no time and there is no space. Now let's think about that for a second, what that means. Because, you and I, yesterday was yesterday, today is today, right now I'm talking with you. Tomorrow I'll be doing something else. So obviously that's time, past, present, future. And, if I go out my door, I'm moving in space. And I'm going from my house, let's say I go to the grocery store and I come back. But when I've talked to spirits, which is the paranormal research that I've done, where I've spoken to mediums and spoken to the spirits through them or the galactics through them, they keep telling me their realities do not have time and space like we do. Now, what that means is that everything that's happening is happening in the same space at the same time all the time. You follow what I'm telling you?
Yeah, everything's happening at once.
It's happening at once, but in the same place too. Okay? So a lot of times we'll say, well, we have these spirit guides and they must be in some higher dimension and they're really far away. No, they're right there with you all the time. It's just a question of what you're able to focus in, like, vibrationally. So people who start developing their gifts are opening up to the higher vibrational frequencies that are always around us. And then they're sensing these things. So like, for example, I as a human being, I found that I could focus on 3 past lives with my current life at the same time in my mind's eye. I could see myself in 3 different places as 3 different people with myself and my current. But if I try to add a 4th person to that, then it hurts my head. So that's my limit in my human form. That's as best as I can go. But when I go into those other lifetimes, it's as if it's happening right now. I'm right there with them. Okay? Like, for example, when I was a young boy, my father bought me these army men from the Civil War. And when we had relatives from the South come, I kept telling my dad, do they know they lost the war? So I think that this was an early sign that I was involved in another lifetime in the Civil War. And I actually talked to a friend in, Utah, I believe, who also has memories of being a general in the Confederacy, and he knew who he was. And I said, I think I was this guy, and he looked at me, he said, yeah, you're right, that's who you were. And we were good friends before the war, and then we were on opposite sides. So I've actually been to the gravesite of this Union general who I believe I was. And what I felt inspired to do when I was there was to read from a book that his wife wrote. I think it was with poetry about him. Okay, it was a really crazy thing, but I had to do it. And I had to go. I had trouble finding his gravesite, but eventually I found it. So I think that I was this general. Because this is what happens to me, and it drives my life partner, Katrina, crazy. I'm always into strategies. Like if there's a situation that comes up that's very difficult, or you're working with people, I try to come up with a strategy so that I can work around that. Like I play in a fantasy baseball league, so I'm coming up with strategies. How do I improve my team? How do I get better players? So I make trades and I try to listen to what the other person's saying. And even when I deal with people, sometimes I have to think about what strategy is going to work, or even in writing a book, what's the right strategy that this will become the most powerful book for people, to read, whether it's a story or whether it's, based on truthful things. So those things lead me to believe that I definitely was that general. And when I've seen pictures of him and I look in his eyes, I feel like that's my energy there. Because the energy of the soul is going to be the same, even if you're a different person. So to some degree, when I link into that, I can actually feel myself being on the battlefields. And I actually went to Gettysburg, where this general was too. And I felt souls come around me, and I had to meditate with Portal de Luz, listening to his favorite music, Pachelbel's Canon in D, and I believe that I helped some of the souls to release them from, whatever was keeping them in Gettysburg. So, so those are just some different, experiences that kind of relate to the question you're asking me.
All right. Joshua, let's take a break for a second, and we'll be right back right after this, okay?
Okay, sounds good.
And welcome back to Conflict Radio. We're with Joshua Shapiro. Well, where were we, Joshua? You want to talk a little bit about the blue skull, or do you have anything to add to the last segment?
Yes, I forgot to mention something about the hollow earth. I don't think I explained it totally correctly, what Ed Palmer told me. So what Mr. Palmer was saying is, first, it's a spiraling mass or gaseous mass. The heavier particles go to the outer surface and form the crust of the planet, and the lighter particles form the inner sun that I talked about. And he said that this is how every planet is formed. So I just want to make sure that's clarified. Okay, so to go on to the blue crystal skull. So this is a very strange subject for me, because I'm about to talk about a crystal skull, which I'm absolutely convinced exists, but I have never met it in the physical. And I even wrote a whole book about it. So I was kind of taking a chance to write a book about a crystal skull I had not seen. But let me tell you how this comes up for me, my experiences, and why I believe that it's real. So I used to be married to a Brazilian lady, and there was a tour that she did to Peru, and she still does tours to Peru. And so there were 40 or 50 Brazilians and one American. So my ex-wife had to speak Portuguese to her countrymen, had to speak English to me, and had to speak Spanish to the people in Peru. So it kind of drove her crazy. So anyway, I had been to Peru before I met my ex-wife, and there was a gentleman that I was introduced to through a mutual friend who joined us. He was an archaeologist. And he was going to guide us when we went to Machu Picchu, which is, like one of the main places everybody wants to go to. You go to Peru, which purportedly is a city built by the Inca that they have abandoned. So to get to Machu Picchu, you have to fly to Cusco, and then you take a train. So first we were in the hotel in Lima, having our breakfast, getting ready to take our flight to Cusco. And the Peruvian archaeologist joined us, and he knew that I was interested in the crystal skulls. So all of a sudden, he stands up and points at me and says, in Spanish, of course, Joshua knows where there's a crystal skull in Peru. So after he did that, I'm kind of thinking to myself, why would he feel that? Why would he think that? But then I had a vision. First, I felt my body being pulled to the northern part of Peru, which I had never visited before, because every time I went to Peru, I always went to all the main sites, which are in the central part or the southern part of Peru. And in the vision I had, I saw like these Indian-looking people in a single-file procession walking in the jungle, a path in the jungle. Because when you go into the northern part of Peru, there's jungle. And there was like a priest or shaman in the front. His arms were extended outward from his body. He was holding something. And I said, I'll bet you what he's holding is a crystal skull. And that if it's a skull connected to me, I mean, at the computer screen that I'm looking at, I can see a picture of the sky. So if you can think about it, sometimes in the sky there's this beautiful white bluish color. That's my favorite color in the world that I've liked since I'm a child. And I said to myself, if I know there's a crystal skull in Peru, I bet you it's that color. So this begins my journey to find the blue skull in Peru. Okay? So again, I'm seeing the vision of the Indian holding the skull, and I'm feeling my body pulled to the northern part of Peru, but I'm not able to do anything on this trip. Now, this archaeologist told us that there were some crystal skulls that were in a main museum in Lima, which we went to after we finished, going to all the other sites and the tour was over. But the skulls were not there and no one knew what we were talking about. So I can't confirm if that was true or not. But anyway, I started to feel this connection with this blue skull. And over 7 years, it starts appearing to me in my mind's eye. And the place that I see it, remember in the beginning I talked about like the amethyst skull I feel over my right shoulder. Well, this skull appears to me, and it's doing it right now as I'm thinking about it, in front of me on my left side at about a 45-degree angle, so it's floating in the air above my head, and that's where I see it. So this starts happening to me. I start seeing this blue skull. It starts appearing around me. But it has to be in another dimension because I'm not seeing it in the physical. But I see it's there. So eventually I can't stand it anymore. So by 1997, I have to quit my job. I'm working for a cellular phone company as a computer person. So I have to quit my job because I do not want to have to come back in 2 weeks. I want to stay in Peru however long it takes me. And I'm not even really sure where I'm going to look for the skull. I just know I have to go into the northern part of Peru. So one of the people who I talked to was part of a spiritual tour agency in Lima. And when we were in Peru another time, I said, his name was Eric. I said, Eric, if there's a crystal skull in Peru, which sacred sites, which ancient sites do you think might be? So he gave me a list of ancient cities in the northern part of Peru. So that was the beginning of our trip when I went back in 1997. I went in the beginning with my ex-wife, but when we got to a certain part, she had to go to Brazil. So I had to find another guide to take me from the city we were in the northern part of Peru. But anyway, to make a long story short, so we visited all these ancient cities, and we talked to the archaeologist, and we asked the archaeologist, does anyone know about crystal skulls? Okay. And no one knew anything what we were talking about. We came to an ancient city of the Mochica people, and I saw that they had some masks that looked skull-shaped. And the Lord of Sipan was the name of one of their key cities, where he was buried, there were people buried around him, like 2 men and 2 women, but there's a man standing over the grave where they're buried, also buried, that's in a meditative pose. So these people are kind of spiritual and they believe in the afterlife, is all we can tell from this. So I go to Sipan and I show the main archaeologist there. Hold on a second, need a drink. My hand, I think it was my right hand, is being magnetically pulled to a certain part of the northern part of Peru, and I have no idea where this is. And he recognizes it. Okay? And he says, where you're being pulled to, there's a city in the mountains called Huancabamba, and that's where you're being pulled to go. So finally, after going to all these different places, I have a clue. But I forgot to tell you one other very important thing. The spirit of this Lord, this ruler of Sipan, he starts showing up around me when I go with my ex-wife to have pizza in a local restaurant. I don't see him, but I feel him next to me. And my ex-wife is very psychic. And I said, there's a presence next to me. Do you feel this? And she says, yes, I do. And I said, who do you think that is? It's the Lord of Sipan. So for some reason, the Lord of Sipan becomes like my protector on the rest of this trip. And must have something to do with this blue skull, which I don't know at this moment. Okay, so that's really weird. So anyway, we go to this city in the northern part of Peru where you can catch a bus to take you high up into the Andes Mountains, 15,000 feet, to get to the city of Huancabamba. So I meet my new guide, and we stay at a youth hostel for the evening. I stay there with him, and I talk to the owner of the youth hostel and explain, I'm here, I'm looking for this blue skull. I've been told that it may be in the area by Huancabamba. And they say, well, we know the main shaman in Huancabamba. We'll write a letter for you on our behalf so that he will meet with you. Because my idea is, we talked about that these Mesoamerican cultures or ancient cultures or primitive people, if anybody knows about crystal skulls, it's them. So I figure, okay, this is great. I have a letter introducing me to the main shaman of Huancabamba. I'm going to show him these pictures I have of crystal skulls, and he's going to tell me where I can find the blue one, right? That makes sense. So anyway, we go up into the mountain, and it's crazy up there. They have a single lane for a bus to go up and down. And when you get really high up there and you look down at this really thin lane, you're thinking, God, please get me there. I don't want to fall off this cliff. It'll be dangerous. But, the drivers are used to doing this. So eventually we get to the city, and we immediately go to the home of the main shaman. He says, come back in the next morning, and I will have time to meet with you. So this is it. I've quit my job. I've spent money to come to Peru. I'm supposed to go to this place. I'm going to meet the shaman, and hopefully he's going to help me to know where the skull is. So we go and we see him the next morning, and I'm with my guide, so he's constantly translating. First, I'm very polite. I let him talk about the spiritual work they do, that they go to a sacred lagoon high up in the Andes Mountains where they take people and they do ceremony and healing with. He talks about how they work with plants and everything. And he asked me, which of the sacred sites of Peru have you enjoyed the most and had the most powerful experience? So I tell him. So now, finally, it's my turn. So imagine this. You're there, you're with the shaman, you're high up in the Andes Mountains, you're looking for the skull, and he's the one, hopefully, that's going to tell you what to do next. So I show him the pictures, and what did he say to me, Michael? Guess.
What?
I have no clue what you're talking about. I know nothing about it.
Well, that's not what you wanted to hear.
No, that's definitely not what I wanted to hear. But then his grandson says to me, we're taking a group up into the mountain to do our ceremony. Would you like to come with? And I thought, well, I don't know what else I'm supposed to do. I don't know, so I might as well go do this. I don't want to be sitting here moping. So I said, sure, I will do it. So I said, if we're going to come at 4 o'clock in the morning, and then there's a car that we've rented that takes us up, and it takes like 5 hours to get there and 5 hours to come down. So we have to leave early in the morning, so we're there when it's light so we can come down, because there's no electricity up in the mountains where we're going. So we say, fine. So, and then I hear this place we're going, the Laguna Negra, the Black Lagoon. Local people are saying, yeah, there's UFOs there, and we've seen people walk on water and all kind of strange events. So I start getting more excited about this. I'm going to some crazy place. Maybe we'll have an interesting adventure. Now, prior to going to the Laguna Negra, Spirit gives me this vision that I'm going to eventually find a flat green field in front of a mountain. That's where I have to go. But I have no clue where this is. So we get up early in the morning, and we're waiting for the grandson to come for us at 4 o'clock. Then it's 5 o'clock. Then it's 6 o'clock. I said, they're not coming. I want to go anyway to my guide. So what he does is he goes into town and looks to see how we can get up there. He actually finds the car that's going to be rented, but at this time I'm a cheap Jew, so I'm not going to pay for 6 people in a car to go up into the mountain. So we pass on that. We find a bus. The bus will take us up into the mountain to a certain city where we can, spend the night, and we can get horses because, this is very high altitude. You and I cannot walk up there. The local people can with no problem, but we're not used to it. So we take this bus. Of course, the bus breaks down on the way up there. This is Peru. Everything that you don't want to see happens in Peru. And they fix the radiator, and eventually we come to the city, and on the bus we befriend this family who invites us to live with them. Not live with them, stay with them, and then get a horse the next day. So it's 3 young boys with their parents, and we become very friendly with them. I have to sleep in my sleeping bag in their little tiny kitchen, and I forget where my guide slept. I think he slept on the floor or somewhere else. So anyway, I'm tired from all these travels, so I go into the kitchen, I rest in my sleeping bag, and I have an experience. So I'm looking up into the ceiling, and in my mind's eye, I see a hole open up, and the blue skull comes flying out of it. Now, this is all in my mind's eye. And then, as I'm looking at this blue skull, all of a sudden, I feel the presence of a tall person in the room who's kind of like a guardian for the skull. So, all I remember from that first contact is that it had an electric blue color to it, and it was talking to me. But I would have to go back into my book I wrote, which is called Journeys of the Crystal Skull Explorers, Travelogue Number 2, Search for the Blue Skull in Peru. I know a long title, but that's the only way to describe the book. And I'm just very excited by that because I'm having a contact, even though it's not in the physical, with this blue skull, which was beautiful, and it was a living consciousness unto itself also. That's what I felt. And then before we left the next morning, again, as I woke up in the kitchen in the sleeping bag, the same thing happened to me. As the blue skull came through the hole, we had a contact. So I was like convinced, I'm in the right place, this is where I'm supposed to go, and I'm going to see the skull, and I'm going to bring it back with me, and I'm going to be able to share this magnificent skull with people, and it's going to do all kinds of amazing healing and energize people and activate their gifts. So, I was excited to go. Now, the next part of the trip, which was interesting, is I had never really ridden a horse before. They didn't have horses, they had mules. But what happened is after my guide was, like pulling the rein, he saw I knew what I was doing. So I figured this was past life. Now, if I was a general in the Civil War, I would have been riding a horse. And since then, I love to ride horses, and I'm not afraid of them. Okay? Even though I can't do galloping, I can do trotting. That's the best I can do. So anyway, I start riding the horse by myself, and I thought that was pretty incredible. So that in itself was worth this trip. So eventually what happens is we get up into the mountain, and the first thing I see when we're up at the top is these gigantic boulders sitting on the ground, which I know have nothing to do with the ground. They did not come from the ground. Maybe they were a building. Maybe this was part of Lemuria, because Lemuria existed in Peru. Okay, but what happened is when Lemuria sank, the Andes Mountains rose. So I think this is the remains of a very powerful building or city that existed in that place. And then we go farther up into the mountain, and we come to the green field that's in front of the mountain, except the lagoon is in between the green field and the mountain. And I know this is where I've been guided to go. Okay, so I went through all these things, all these different places, talking to all these people, not knowing what I'm doing, and just trusting that eventually I'm going to come to the right place, and I'm there. And the final thing that convinced me of it was in the mountain itself is a skull face. I saw a skull face in that mountain. Now, my problem is Spirit had told me I needed to stay for 3 days when I found the place, and I had no camping gear. So I had to go all the way back down and come back up within the next day or two in order to really be here fully camping so that we could explore all the different things. So to make a long story short, we did come back. I had 2 guides with me at that point. The first night, a strange mist appears, and I see what I call UFO clouds, clouds that are alive, that have energy appearing around us. We climbed the mountain to try to get to the face. We couldn't make it. So what I did is I did a meditation with pictures of the crystal skull, but I think that there were a lot of beings around us that knew we were there. And then, of course, I didn't know how to put the tent up, so it was raining and rain was getting in, and, it was hard for me to go to sleep. The second day, the second guide said, I can show you how to get to the spot you want. And we got to within, 20 or 30 feet of where that skull face was I saw on the mountain. But when I got there, I felt no energy whatsoever. So I'm going like, I'm doing everything right, but nothing is working here. How am I going to see this crystal skull? Or I'm thinking maybe the crystal skull is inside the mountain in a city or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, when we come down, we meet some children, and the children tell us, there was the shaman who said he went inside the mountain into a city. So that was very encouraging. But then, I kind of felt like I need to rest. This is, again, it's high altitude and we're doing all this exploration. So we went to our campsite, and then I start feeling myself magnetically pulled away. And my guide is going to follow me, but then I hear he's not going to be able to come with you. So then he sees people by our campsite, so he says, I'll stay and protect everything. You go do whatever it is you feel you need to do. So I'm walking like a zombie, listening to music on a cassette player. We don't have MP3 players at this time.
Yeah, a little Walkman, right?
Yeah, a little Walkman. And eventually I feel to stop, and I look around, and there's a circle of stones, and something says just, kind of sit down and relax. So I sit down and I relax, and then it's like a story comes to me, which when I got back to the campsite, I had a little computer and battery. I had to start typing and writing it down immediately, which when I did, I had a really bad headache. But this is basically the story that came, which is related to the blue skull. So I saw in the area I was sitting that there existed during the time of Lemuria a huge temple. And the place I was sitting was where a circular room existed where there were 13 crystal skulls, each one in a separate glass case, held on the wall. A person could come into this temple room to have meditation experience or work with the skulls. And the blue one was one of the skulls there, and I saw all the other ones had different colors. And what happened is when Lemuria was destroyed, the blue skull, and I don't know if there were other ones too, probably, I'm only linked into the blue skull, was taken to Atlantis and could have sat in one of the temples that I feel existed in Atlantis. And then when Atlantis was destroyed, the blue skull was brought back to this area on a flying ship, a levitation craft, and was gifted to the people who lived in the city in the mountains. These people, I think, are like the people that are in Mount Shasta. They are descendants of Lemuria, who saw that the surface was terrible, so they created an underground city under the mountain. And they were tall. So I think that this tall being I saw with the blue skull when I had the vision in the Peruvian family's kitchen, that he was from there. Now, during the time of the Lord of Sipan, because apparently I knew the Lord of Sipan, that's why he was acting as my guide. I later found out I was his son-in-law. I was married to his daughter. These tall beings brought the blue skull to the Lord of Sipan and said that you can keep the skull for a certain period of time, and then we will need for you to bring it back to us when it's time to release it. So he asked his son-in-law, who I believe was myself, to take that blue skull and bring it back to the people in the mountain. And I just think that He was kind of spiritually guided where to go. He saw the skull face in the mountain, left the skull on the mountain, and left, and the people in the mountain took it back. So this was the story that was given to me while I was there. Now, it may sound, again, crazy and fantastic and the whole thing, but apparently I've worked with this blue skull, probably in Lemuria and Atlantis, and this is why it connects with me and knows my soul. Now, the question then remains, since I went to Peru 3 times to this same location, hoping each time I would be allowed even just to see the skull, and it didn't happen, will it ever possibly come out? Okay? And the answer it gave me is humanity is not ready for me yet. My vibrational frequency is too high. But there will come a day, and I don't know if it'll call me or somebody else may find it, or there's going to have to be some story how it's discovered so people will believe it, or this skull literally has the power to physically manifest anywhere it wants at any time. That's how powerful it is. So since writing the book, and since, in my Crystal Skull talks, occasionally talking about the blue skull, there have been other people who have reported they see it. Or the other thing the blue skull does for me in my lectures is it will float onto my right hand, and I can feel a weight on my right hand when this happens. And then I say, if you want to feel the energy of it, put your hand over my right hand. And people have said the energy's been really powerful. But the other thing that my right hand has held is Dr. Brown's Atlantean crystal ball. So when we were in Georgia, not this time, but when I first met Katrina here, we were invited to a center on, what do they call those islands off Florida that,
The Keys?
Key Islands. Yeah, the Keys. We went to the last island on the Keys where there was a center. And the man who brought the Atlantean crystal ball, for some reason, because we were too late to have a private session with it, he said to me after we did kind of like a healing session, open your hand up, and he put the ball in my hand. Now, he knew we had crystal skulls there, but he forbid us to have the crystal skulls out and open. But I will admit, and your listeners, don't tell this man if you ever meet him, I had a little tiny skull in my pocket when I was holding the Atlantean crystal ball. So anyway, he put it in my hand. There were people behind me. We did a meditation. I think I had some visions of the future while I was holding it. And the cool thing about it is I got to compare how it worked in its energy to a crystal skull. And my sensing was that the energy in the ball was programmed. It was programmed by the people who had it long ago. It was not a living consciousness. It was like an AI intelligence, programmed by somebody else. And what it would do is when it would have contact with the individual, it would link into the unique frequency of energy, and then it would do whatever it was going to do. Now, after that experience, what I felt is the ball never left my hand. Like an etheric image of it stayed in my hand, and it's still there to this day. Little did we know, a few years later, while the ball was visiting with a friend we know in Mount Shasta, it shattered, so it no longer exists. But I feel it in my hand. So the blue skull and the Atlantean crystal ball sit in my right hand, and I can link into them and share that energy with other people. So I have not met this blue skull yet, but my sensing is that when we get close to where our world is going to go through major transformation, where consciousness is going to raise, that's the time when possibly not only the blue skull, but the original set of skulls may come out. Now, I do not know if this is one of those original ones, because it told me to say, when I come out, you will not make me special in any way. I'm just the blue skull, and people will have the experience. Put nothing special around me. I'm just the blue skull. So that's what it is. So if anybody is intrigued by this story, we have a book, Journeys of the Crystal Skull Explorers, Travelogue number 2, Search for the Blue Skull in Peru, where I had a computer with me on every trip, and I wrote down each day what happened to me. So it's more than just looking for the blue skull. There's a lot of spiritual and paranormal insights and experiences I had. And the challenge is when you go to Peru, you go into an altered state, and I probably can't remember half of what happened to me unless I read the book, unless I read my notes. So it's really quite remarkable. Do you have any questions about my story with the blue skull?
No, I do have a question about just the general. Why do you think that they chose a skull shape for this? Like if they could carve anything out of the crystal, why do you think it is skulls?
Yes, that's an excellent question, and that's normally a question that gets asked every talk. Well, let's look at the human bone skull right now. So we have this skull inside of us. Everybody has it. Now, for some people, the image of a bone skull means death, doom, and evil. Okay, that's the way it's been used. If you see a bone skull like sitting in the ground, that was a person who is alive, and some people are afraid of death. So the skull shape has been misused to represent this at a time, whereas with some of the indigenous people, they understood that this shape is very important because it allows us to receive cosmic knowledge and information. You know, like a pyramid, if you go 1/3 of the way down in a pyramid, it rejuvenates metal. Well, it's the shape of the skull. I mean, some higher intelligence, whether it was galactic beings or angels or co-creators with God, I don't know, but they created the form that we are currently in, and they designed the skull to be this way. And I believe that the skull was created this way so it would receive cosmic knowledge and information. Now, we already talked about that quartz crystal is a transmitter and receiver of different frequencies of energy. So if you take that quartz and put it into the shape of a human bone skull, it really becomes kind of like a computer, a video camera, a storehouse of information that can be transmitted telepathically to someone, healing energies that it can store. So I think that it's because of this shape, it gives the crystal all these capabilities, along with the possibility that a living consciousness or intelligence is able to work through the skull and kind of bring it to life and animate it. Because for many people who are guardians of crystal skulls, like Portal de Luz, you know, if he was sitting here, I didn't have him sit here. I did when I was doing my class for this group in Seattle a couple of days ago, and he would not shut up. I could hear him talking to me, saying like, "Dad, you got to talk about this and that." I said, "I only have half an hour, Portal, please." But he did get a message in for the people. But to a lot of people who are crystal skull guardians, this is like they're having a connection with a living being, a person. And I think that when the crystal's in this shape, it's a little bit easier to relate to it because it kind of looks like a person, you know. Gotcha. And then guardians get a name. So it's the form to receive fantastic knowledge and information that can be energetically or telepathically transferred to the people around it, and it looks like a person, so we're a little bit comfortable, you know, saying, hey, I have a relationship, I'm having a communication conversation. So that's my take on why the skull shape.
All right, so I do want to ask you a little about coronavirus and the times that are going on today. A lot of people might be sensing a lot of weirdness with today's time. Do you have anything to say about the times we're living in right now with coronavirus and everything?
Yes, absolutely. So first, what I want the listeners to understand is that, and I'm going to have to get into my Las Vegas experience and this future self that communicates with me, Arjas, in order to explain this. So again, I'm going to come from a crazy tangent. When the virus was starting to be announced to come into the United States, I knew absolutely that it wasn't what they were saying it was, and then it would be used to manipulate people to have more control. Okay? Now, what do I mean by that? Well, if you think back, I would say, you know, in February they start talking about it come to you. It's really in March is when things started getting crazy, where they started reporting all these people had it and everything. Now, what I will tell you is I had a friend in China that I got one email to and one email back. And he said that, the government of China was very, very, I don't know, say evil or, whatever word you want to use for that, and that they weren't really telling how many people were being affected by the virus. So I think when it was first released in China, a lot of people got it and a lot of people died, because I saw a video through another friend on Facebook that I watched, which was like from people's telephones there. So I think that when it first came out, and it still exists, it's real, it's not imaginary. It was affecting a lot of people, and a lot of us who were spiritual, a lot of people I know that were spiritual, we knew that something was going to come up, some kind of incident or event or reason why the world as we know it would have to be shut down or changed. Okay? We weren't sure what form this would take, but it would have to happen. And part of the reason why is because the systems that we were relying upon, our financial system, our medical system, our food, our social systems, it wasn't based on truth. It was being controlled, and we just got used to it, but something had to come up to change it. Now, for a lot of people, this became scary for two reasons, of course. Number one, you could catch the disease and maybe get seriously ill or die, or a lot of people lost their jobs. It affected the money, and here in the U.S., the stimulus money that we received, that's not going to be enough to cover what people were losing. So, so a lot of people still don't know where this is all headed and where it's going. Now, I have some good news to report out of China, which probably came up so I could say this on your radio show. We had a Chinese carver that we worked with, and we didn't hear from him for about 5 years. All of a sudden on LinkedIn, he shows up and he writes me an email. He says, I'm able to do my business now, and everything is coming back to normal in China. Very few people are catching the disease now, and only Beijing are they having a slight problem. But the other places, even Wuhan, things are going back to normal. So in other words, a lot of people are hoping, that this will pass by us and life as we know it will go back to normal. So I'm trying to confirm this with a second person I know that I talked to in China and see, if indeed this is true. Like another group of carvers we have, they wrote back very short. I said, are you still working and so forth? Yes, we're fine. Everybody's okay. No problem. And we're able to start, making skulls and send them out to the world again. So the reason why this is positive is it means they went through a process with the coronavirus, and now they're starting to come out at the other end. So perhaps this is what will happen to us if we follow their time scale. Then maybe August, September, October is when, things will lessen up. Now, from another perspective, the way I look at this is that this may be a catalyst that's going to lead us into a positive change, even though we can't see it right now. Now, in order to explain that, I have to talk about an experience I had in Las Vegas where I was struck by a van in a coma, and this guide called Argus that's speaking through me, so that I can explain to you why I believe that's true.
Okay.
Okay, so 1990, 91, I lived in Las Vegas, and I had a strange encounter that happened to me. I was walking on a main road. Now, the main roads in Las Vegas, they drive 55, and it's like a mini highway there. So I was going to go to McDonald's to eat a lunch, and all of a sudden I hear a loud screech behind me. Now, I'm a pretty fearless person. I feel I'm protected, so I did not look behind me. I just kept walking. But I remember that my vision went from light to dark, like you see in the old-time movies, where they go from light to dark. And then the next thing I know is I wake up temporarily, and a doctor is asking me, and I'm in a hospital bed, and I'm strapped down. Do you remember the truck that hit you? And I'm going, what is he talking about? I don't know. And then I passed out again. And then I came back the next day into consciousness, And finally, they explained to me, well, there was a van which jumped the curb and struck you from behind. You flew up into the air and landed in a gravel area, and you have been in a coma for 3 days. Okay? Now, the thing about this is I don't have any memory of being hit. I just remember losing consciousness and my vision going from light to dark. So my belief is the following. This was a pre-planned event before I was born. And I don't know if it was galactics, dimensional, I think it was galactics. They teleported me out, my etheric or energy or light body. They teleported me out. I went on spaceship, and they brought me to a meeting. Now, if any of you have seen it wasn't the first Star Wars movie made, but it's the first one in the series, where Princess Amidala goes to the council on this, the main planet, and there's all these beings from all the different worlds, and she's talking about how, this group is attacking her and taking over her planet, and she needs help. Well, that's how I envisioned this meeting I was brought to, is I was with a group of beings from many different places, and what I think was going on is they said, how can we help our brothers and sisters on the earth to bring peace and harmony? And they needed to have, and I think that there were some other people like me who were in body on the earth that were brought, and they were asking us opinions. If we do this scenario, how will the humans respond? Will they come from too much fear, or should we do this or whatever? So this is kind of the sensing I got of where I was. And then there was another time where I had an image in my mind from this where I was like on 3 different planets. Like I saw 3 different images. I don't know what those planets were. And then the last image I have from this is I see a door in front of me, and there's somebody I'm talking to who I believe I know well. And I'm saying to this being, this person, you can't do this to me. You cannot blank my memory. There's so much incredible things I learned. I got to tell everyone about it. And I said, we're sorry. It's not going to come out until it's a certain time. So even what I'm relating to you now from this experience is probably only a very tiny part of what happened to me. Mm-hmm. Okay, so it could be there's a message or some information that they planted inside of me, and there's nothing I can do to bring it out until it's the right time. But I'm sharing this with you because when the coronavirus started, I already knew that they would be lying to us about what's going on and so forth. No question in my mind it's a man-made thing, and it was created intentionally to bring about what we're experiencing now. However, now I want to bring in Project Looking Glass because something was said there that I think is very important. So I need to explain what that is. Now, I'm not an expert on this. This is just something, again, that Spirit brought me to, and I watched a video, and I understood what was being said. So Project Looking Glass is a device that was created by the invisible groups, the secret groups. According to a gentleman named Bill Wood, who was interviewed by Carrie Cassidy on Project Camelot. So there's 3 ebooks I'm going to offer to all the listeners, and one of these ebooks, which we'll talk at the end, is a link to this video, so you'll be able to see the whole video with Mr. Wood. Mr. Wood was somehow involved with this project, and he said, first of all, the device itself was from components we took from the Stargate system. So the Stargate system would be similar to, what we see in the Stargate series of programs that they made, where, it's some kind of device where you go through and you can go through space and time. Like you can step on one here, and then all of a sudden you're on Mars or you're on the moon or wherever. But I think they also use it to travel through time. But I don't fully understand the Stargate, so I don't want to really get into it. I'm just relaying the information Mr. Wood gave. So they took these components and they created a device which they called Looking Glass. The purpose of Looking Glass was to allow an individual to think in their mind about some situation, scenario, or some plan they wanted to do. And I think it's holographically they would see the result of what it is. Like let's say This wouldn't be an example they would do, but for us, let's say like, you want to create your own new business and you have like 3 or 4 options. Well, you could think about option number 1, and Project Looking Glass would throw back at you what the result would be if you attempted that. You could see if you would be successful or how it would work or whatever. So Bill Wood said it shows you possibilities, but it's based on, the energy or the information or the scenario that you're inputting into it. It shows you what could happen. Now, I'm not sure if I understood this correctly or not, but I think he said that around the ending of the Mayan calendar, which was December 21st, 2012, and I remember going back to that time that a lot of us were doing all kinds of meditations and ceremonies all over the planet. I do know, and again, it could come from this meeting I had on the inner planes, if you will, that there was a shift vibrationally on the inner planes that happened at that time, but that it would take several years before it would fully manifest in our physical reality. So I had that message or sensing. But I think what Mr. Wood said, that Project Looking Glass stopped working because it would only show one future reality, that no matter what they tried to do, like, I think somebody's orchestrating this pandemic, but your listeners need to understand, I do not have a whistleblower I'm talking to. I'm just going by my intuition, okay, my feeling. Mm-hmm. There are so many people they have different theories and opinions, and I'm not here to make people angry. Like I had one friend I shared some things with that I believed, and he got very upset with me. So I'm not here to get people upset. I'm just trying to put the pieces together that have come to me and see if I can make some sense out of it. So maybe something that I'm talking about, your listeners can use, and maybe it will make sense to them. So anyway, with Project Looking Glass, it would keep showing just one result, one future that's going to happen. He compared it to a game of chess where you have 2 master players and they already know who's going to win. And the one who's going to lose, there are no moves that he can make to prevent him losing the game. So that was a good analogy that he did that I could follow. And I'm assuming that this future it's showing is a very positive future. Okay, because they don't want anyone to work with the Looking Glass devices, and I think there's more than one, because they'll see this positive future and maybe even events how it happens. Now, the other thing that he mentioned is that there is an event that will happen, which he didn't say what it was, that could be the catalyst to bring this positive future. And so what I did in this ebook that I'm going to offer to you, which I haven't explained yet who it's coming from, I put in 6 possible things I could imagine that could be that event that brings world peace and harmony to our planet. Okay, so now here's the last piece that's helping me with this. Now, you may not believe me with this. Again, I mean, I'm saying a lot of off-the-wall stuff, but I try to be as honest as possible, and I always tell people, these are just my experiences. You decide for yourself if it makes sense or not, or you think I'm crazy or whatever. Apparently, when I was on Coast to Coast talking about some of my crystal skull experiences, the people didn't think I was crazy because it's taken me a long time to answer everybody. Okay, so what started happening to me is I started to feel the presence of a being around me who eventually told me his name was Argus, and I explained where Argus comes from in the free ebook. And I said, well, who are you, and why are you around me? Like what anybody would ask. And he said a very profound statement. He said, Joshua, I'm who you become in your future between 2037 and 2040. I said, how is that possible? How can I be communicating with a future part of myself? Well, it comes back to, remember we talked about there's no space and time?
Yeah.
Well, it has to do with this, because on a telepathic spiritual level, I can talk to my future. Why not? I mean, I'm talking to parts of myself from my past, this Civil War general and a musician I was, and what was the other one? I think I was part of the soul group, a politician. Okay? So I'm linking into these other aspects of myself, so why couldn't I link into a future aspect of myself? So Argus says, I am your future. And then while I was in Brazil in 1996 or 1997, so I had my first non-white winter where it was warm because it's on the other side of the planet. He writes through me what it's like to live where he is. So what I did with it is I put that into a story where Argus is the storyteller from the future, educating the children about how they got into, he didn't call it a golden age, he called it the new dawn. Okay, but in that story that I wrote, and it's on the internet, I left the original story I wrote, assuming that the new dawn began on December 21st, 2012, which it hasn't, okay? But that's what I was picking up then. I put Argus' message into this story. And then what I did is I copied the message out and put it into a free ebook so people could read it. So between Project Looking Glass, Argus talking to me, and my experience of being in the other dimension, there is an inner knowing that I have inside of myself that, just like Project Looking Glass is saying, that no matter what's going on, there is something that is about to happen that's forever going to change our world. And by 2037 to 2040, we will have paradise. We will have complete peace. So the key is, and you and I talked about this before we did the interview today, not to come from fear. Do not give your power away. Go day by day. Do your meditations. Do things that bring you joy. Like before I had all these radio shows coming up, I just kept myself busy doing online surveys to make some extra money, and I found some game that I like to play online. And now I'm friends with a whole bunch of people from all over the world, and we just help each other. But, try to find something that brings you happiness. I'll give you an example of an exercise that I recommend to people when I do my private crystal skull consultations. I say, take a piece of music that when you listen to it, you cannot help yourself. You have to dance to it. You have to move your body to it because it just energizes you. So if you don't want anyone to see you dancing, you're, uncomfortable with that, go out in a place in nature with, a portable music device, or bring your MP3 player, put your headphones on, and just let yourself totally go. And what will happen is the higher aspect of yourself, which is full of joy and love, because I believe we're all pieces of Creator, will start coming through, and it will start energizing you, and it will just help you to deal with this craziness that's happening right now.
Well, there's a lot coming out right now, as far as we just did a show on this, the deep state and the whole
Right.
Epstein scandal and the New World Order and everything. And according to this Project Looking Glass, I looked into this last night because we had discussed it. They're going to lose.
Exactly. That's why they don't want anyone to work with it, because it shows they lose no matter what they try to do.
And for my listeners, I'm just going to go ahead and say this. For my listeners who have listened to the other shows, we talked about Q, and Q actually mentions Looking Glass in one post. He said Looking Glass ? This was a post from a couple years ago. I wrote it down to read it here today. He said Looking Glass ? Going forward in order to look back. Q. So Q is even saying that they're looking at the Looking Glass, that they have their own, that the Patriots, the White Hats, have their own Looking Glass, and that's how they've been able to see exactly what the deep state has been doing.
Right. Now there is something we already talked about, which leads me to believe also about the positive future, and that is the people that live inside the earth, whether it's the descendants of Atlantis and Lemuria, or the inner earth people. This is their home. They're not going to allow it to be destroyed. But the challenge is, it's about free will. I believe that we as humanity, if we all, work together and helped each other, we could overcome every single challenge and problem that exists on the earth today. So I think that what's happening now is we're being given this chance. And if you go on YouTube, you will hear from many different people that will describe what's really happening, I believe, around various aspects of what we're being told. Like they're saying, you need to wear a mask. The masks aren't going to help you. They're going to make you sicker, is what I believe, for example. So there's so much inconsistency in what we're being told. And just think about it. They say for the virus, that some people will get it and they won't show signs, but you can get it from them. How convenient is that? And I just don't believe the numbers they're saying for the people who've gotten it and who have died. It's just something about it that's not true. So the good thing about what's happened is people have had to pretty much stay home, but then they've had to look at themselves more. Because a lot of times, people in the 9 to 5, they get very busy and everything, and they never take time for themselves. So now they have time to read. They can watch these incredible videos that are on YouTube, look at the different ideas that people have about what's happening. And also the other sign, I think, too, is I don't understand why President Trump does what he does. He acts so crazy, even foolish at times, but I think he's trying to subtly show us the folly of what's going on. Like he won't support the main doctor who's saying, what we need to do and everything like that. So I think he's
been back and forth on a lot of things.
Right, and I think Q also has messages. He calls Trump POTUS, President of the United States. So think about it, too, the election, where everybody thought Hillary was going to win, and then all of a sudden Trump comes out victor. Something shifted somehow, and he had to be the president for us to go through this. And why are the Democrats trying to get rid of him so much? I think the Democrats may be connected to the people who are doing the virus. So it's a really crazy time. Who knows what to believe, what not to believe. You have to learn how to trust your intuition and discernment.
Well, I think that there's a lot of truth about to start breaking and coming out about what's really going on.
Yeah. And I think whistleblowers are being encouraged now to share what they know about the secret projects that have been going on, the advanced technologies that we have. So even though we may not be able to see in this moment where everything's headed, and they keep saying on the internet, there's going to be another wave of it. When 9/11 came, the media kept constantly telling us what was going to happen next. So they're trying to do the same thing again, I think. But again, like I said, I'm just an individual like the rest of you. I just, I'm going on the internet watching YouTube videos. I'm listening to my intuition, what I think. So I have no clue if, some of these things that I've shared, if they're true or not. But, I think most people would agree that there's definitely something that's not making sense. So, I heard in the commercial on my show on Coast to Coast, the main host was talking to someone and asked him, where do you think we're headed? And whoever this guy was, and he has a lot more information about what's going on than I do, he said, eventually it's going to fail. It's not going to work. It's going to fall apart. So this is what I feel. And I believe that Argus is in the future. I believe Project Looking Glass is showing a positive future. And also I believe that I was shown things in my coma experience that are going to bring us into a positive way. So, however, you can deal with it without being fearful, and, life is not going to go back to the way that it was. That's for sure. So those are my thoughts.
But it could get significantly better for everybody if
Right. It may get worse for a period of time, but I think that the end result is, like Bill Wood was saying, we're in a chess match and we already know the ending, and the ending is positive. So we just need to go day by day. I mean, if you come across good information, share it with other people. That's what I've tried to do. Like when I got the message from this friend in China, I put his picture up and I put what he said to me up on my Facebook page. So, if you get free ebooks, maybe we should talk about that now, since we're kind of coming towards the end here.
Yeah. Before we go into that, I just have a couple questions.
Okay.
Sure. Would you call this time another great enlightenment, and that the 20th century was like a dark age spiritually?
No, I don't think the 20th century was a dark age at all. I think what it was the beginning of, an enlightenment. It was the beginning of having more contact with other intelligences. I think that towards the end of the 20th century, that what was happening is that the truth was starting to come out. And it was building for the 21st century where we will have a final resolution with all of this. And there's one other theory that I just thought of that's been spoken about what's happening right now. And that is that the whole solar system is going into a higher state, and the Earth has to go with them. So the question then happens is, what happens to the people who aren't ready for this higher state of being? And what I've heard and what I believe is there's another planet in another solar system that is prepared or is being prepared, where the souls who cannot handle this higher frequency, will pass from here or may actually be transported by galactics to this other place so they can continue the lessons here. But this Earth has to go into this higher vibrational state because the entire solar system is moving into this higher space, and our planet cannot hold it back. So, and the Earth also, according to these sources, has allowed many slow-learning souls to come here because the physical reality would provide them the proper lessons. But now we're moving into a time where the whole solar system has to move into this higher state of being. So this is another kind of a theory that has been talked about for many years.
Yeah.
What was the other question you had, Michael?
How old were you when you became aware of your first spirit guide?
I don't know the answer to that question. All I can tell you is that when I was a teenager, I remember I couldn't go to sleep at night, and I kept feeling like everything they were teaching me in school was false. So that was kind of like the beginning of waking up. And I also remember I had a dream where a Native American, I think his name was Whitehorse, handed me a plaque with a inverted tree structure with like 4 branches, but it was inverted. And I was compelled to put this symbol on my first book, Journeys of a Crane Age Networker. And I since learned that that symbol represented, and probably is part of what I'm doing right now, is that I'm taking the wisdom from the higher levels and I'm trying to figure out a way, that's why there are 4 levels, how to share it with people so it's understandable, whether it's, doing interviews, public talks, making blog posts, writing books, whatever it is. Writing music even, too, is another way to do it. Mm-hmm. So, but I cannot remember when I had my first guide. Now, I know when we were doing Mystery of the Crystal Skulls, there was a Tibetan Lama guide that started showing up for all of us, Master Lee, and then I thought it was really strange that the name of the person who helped us in the design of our book, Mystery of the Crystal Skulls, revealed his first name was Lee, and he talked about the Jade Master that was his guide, which was a Tibetan master that was helping him. So, that was back in, when did we do the 1987, 88 time frame? But I can't really recall who my first guide was. I mean, I know my mother's father has helped me sometimes. Master Lee has helped me. My music, I get help from, what's the Hungarian composer that everybody knows? Franz Liszt. So it's like there's different guides. I'm sure I have Galactic Guide. There was a lady who worked with one of our crystal skulls and drew, God, I can't think of the name of these galactic people. It starts with an A. Antaurus, a woman, and finally she came through a medium and made contact with me. So, there's just different guides. The crystal skulls, in a way that they appear etherically, they're guides for me too, okay, in a way. And, and then I can't always tell you, when I hear something in my thinking voice that just pops in, Is that my higher self? Is that God? Is that Argus? Usually the answer here is not all things one, so it doesn't matter where it's coming from, as long as you feel that it's something special to share and that could help others.
All right. So I guess I got one more question. How does it feel when a spirit is around and communicating?
Well, I can only say for me, everybody's different. So, like, for example, I always have a guide standing to the right of me when I'm doing a lecture or I'm talking. So I feel him. So it's a pressure on the right side of my body. And then if I'm quiet in my mind, I'll hear, something said. So I'll go into this. He feels like it's a teacher energy is what I get. And I don't know if it's a dimensional being or a galactic. It doesn't really matter for me. I just know that when it's there, that it has good information to share. So he said, share some of my other profound comments. When you are spontaneous is when Creator can manifest through you in the most powerful way, is one. Another one, you cannot, there's nothing that you can imagine unless it already exists somewhere else in God's infinite universe. So, for example, again, in one of the ebooks where I write the 6 possibility of events, I'm imagining those events happening. They either must be happening on a parallel Earth, or they're going to happen on a parallel Earth, or they're going to happen here.
Do you feel like a magnetic shift at all?
For the Earth, that it'll go through a magnetic shift?
I mean, like when a spirit is around, when you're communicating, do you feel like a magnetic shift around you?
No, it's just a pressure, and I feel a tingling and a vibration.
All right.
And then I hear things. So that's how I do my sessions, which is of course available for any of your listeners too. My intuitive sessions is I link in to the vibrational frequency of the person I'm talking to, and I'm listening to this being talking to me at the same time. And then I just be spontaneous and go with the flow.
All right, that's interesting. So you have 3 free ebooks for our listeners. You want to explain to them how they can get them?
Right. So since about 2003, 2004, we've been doing periodically a free Crystal Skull ebook. So, like, if you're really intrigued about the crystal skulls and what we were talking about them, this would kind of be a good book for a beginner. You get to meet our skulls, you get to hear some more of our stories, and then, we have some special insights and information. So I'm probably crazy, but that book's over 100 pages. I don't know people who will give away a 100-page book. The second book that I'm offering is about the idea that we live in a computer simulation. Now, this is from a bunch of information that hit me all at one time when Katrina wasn't home and I was all alone and I was kind of bored. I just started following these videos, and it was very profound what I was hearing about. So I put it together in a little ebook, which hopefully these videos are still there that you can follow up and look at yourself. And the other thing is, let me take water here because I'm losing my voice.
Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead.
The other thing is that I talk about a friend named Jerry Willis, or I talk about him in the Blue Skull book because this took place in Peru. By Lake Titicaca is a large stone door, which most people know as Amaru Maru. The local people call it, I think it's Wilka Uta, or Uta, something like that, which means doorway of the gods. This is supposedly a place where the scientists who created our reality come through to check on what's going on here. And so Katrina and I led a group to Peru, and we had to visit that door. So I talk about in the Blue Skull book my experience that I had doing a meditation, of course, with Portal de Luz in front of that door. So that's another key that we discussed. Then the last book is the message from Argus from the future, which I received in 1996 and 1997. And I talk about, how this all came about, how I met Argus and what was going on in my life and so on. So to receive these 3 ebooks, all you have to do, and Conflict, he has my email address, is send an email to crystalskull crystalskullexplorers@gmail.com. crystalskullexplorers@gmail.com, and just put in there that you listen to Conflict Radio and you'd like me to send you the 3 ebooks. The other thing I was able to arrange for anyone who might be interested is I have some friends in Canada who have a large collection of crystal skulls, and we're both excited to help people who would like to get their first crystal skull. So he's offering to the listeners of this program for a week, and I have a special code to give you if you email me again at crystalskullexplorers@gmail.com. I'll give you a coupon code, and you'll get 10% off in order to get your first crystal skull. And it could be anyone that they have there, and they have everything that you can imagine. The other thing you may also want to do, your listeners may want to do, is you may want to look at, I've mentioned some of our books that we've written. There are actually 4 books I've written recently. There's the Blue Skull book. There's a book about Mexico, going to Mexico, and what experiences I had with crystal skulls there. There's the novel, the first novel we put out, Journey into the Unknown and Back Again, where the blue skull shows up again. So you get to meet some more of them. It's about a person who gets invited to go into the other side. It's a trilogy, so we have book 1 done for that. And then the first crystal skull I met, the name given to it by the former owner, Al Ramirez, is Ami, which means friend. So he gave me information that they had about this crystal skull that's never been shared before. So I put it together with my experiences. So I have another ebook about Ami that you can get. Those books are on our website, okay? And you can take a look at them if you go to CSE, like Crystal Skull Explorers, CSE.crystalskullexplorers.com. So that's our website. So, take advantage of the free ebooks, or visit our website, take a look at some of the other books. And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to send me an email, and I'll be happy to answer.
Awesome. Well, we really appreciate you coming on. I thank you for your time. And is there anything else you'd like to add before we call it a show?
Yes, I'd like to add one last message for the listeners. Conflict, thank you for asking. So the key for us to build our future is very simple. We have to start working together. And that means that we have to recognize that every other person on the planet is our family. And there's going to be certain people who are going to annoy you and you don't like, and so on. But, we can't give in to that energy that separates us. That's what I think is trying to happen right now. They're trying to separate us and, get us to stay in our house and control us. You may get inspired by spirit or have inspiration come for something to do during this time that could help other people to be more positive about what's going on, or something that you read. So just keep in mind that this is a really special time that's giving us an opportunity to work together, and that eventually we will have a positive future coming up. I'm absolutely positive of it. No one can talk me out of it. And I see the world through Argus eyes, where we're headed, and it's wonderful and beautiful, and probably none of us can imagine what it's going to be like. That's how amazing it's going to be. But the other clue is, for me, is, when we finally have full disclosure. Now, disclosure is coming up through the whistleblowers. When full disclosure comes, and it must come, whether the governments who have the information tell us, or the extraterrestrials just show up and say, hey, we're real, we're here, very advanced technology that's been hidden from us will come out, and there will be no problem that we experience now, like hunger or poverty or whatever. Everything will be resolved. So this is the future that I see through Argus eyes. And the last thing I would say about this is, what if everyone listening to this radio show said, okay, let's do an experiment that Joshua is suggesting. We'll all imagine this positive future, that we're having contact with the galactics. We have advanced technology. We're all working together. We're brothers and sisters. We have total peace. We can go visit the other worlds. We can learn from these beings. Let's all imagine that this is our future. Through the power of our mind and the geometric multiple of that energy, we could create that future. Or how many people would it take, like the book The 100th Monkey, written by Ken Keyes, that talks about these monkeys that live on these islands, that they taught them how to clean their sweet potato, that after the 100th monkey learned how to clean that potato, then all the monkeys on all the islands knew it. He said that's what could happen with humanity. When the 100th person, the 1,000th person, the 100,000th person totally gets and is willing to work towards peace, and that's part of their consciousness, then everyone on the planet all of a sudden is of the consciousness of peace. So I think we have a very exciting time coming up, but it's going to be challenging. But use your intuition and your discernment when you're looking at the media, what they're talking about, to really see if it makes sense to you. So that would be my last thoughts or conflict.
All right. So, great show. Thanks a lot for coming on, and we'll be right back. Conflict Radio right after this. Welcome back to Conflict Radio. That was a pretty interesting show. I hope everybody reaches out to Joshua for those free books. All you have to do is go to crystalskullexplorers.com and shoot him an email, and he'll respond to you. So I hope everybody has a good remainder of the week. We'll be back. Our next episode will be with Anthony Peake. That promises to be an interesting show. I hope to get into a little bit of the simulation universe with him. So be sure to look for that. Make sure you like and subscribe to the Conflict Radio Network on YouTube. Definitely check us out on all the normal podcast catchers, Spreaker, Apple iTunes. And until next time,